What's up, friends? I'm Zach Joachim. This is On the Horn. We're coming at you from the Siegel Center after VCU beat St. Joseph's 79-72 behind a career-high 20 points from Michael Belle, who was phenomenal today. Career-high 8 assists from Terrence Hill Jr. VCU's leading scorer very much turned a distributor today. And Brandon Jennings, 18 points, 4 of 4 from 3. Hit a couple of huge ones in the second half. This game had 11 lead changes, 9 ties. St. Joseph's led for 14-37. They'd won 3 in a row coming into this game, and you could see it. They were playing good basketball. They came to play. VCU led for 18-04. I'm going to start, though, by thanking Megan Martelli and Phil, and just they have a wonderful family who I think everyone in the VCU community has been overjoyed to get to know over this season and over the past year. And Phil got me emotionally at the end of that press conference by thanking me. I try and say thank you after every question to players and coaches. Sometimes, when you're in the middle of a press conference and everyone's talking, I just kind of mouth it at them. I don't know. I think it's important always to show gratitude in all walks of life, and I'm not trying to hype myself up or anything here, but Phil brought it up at the end of the press conference, and that was incredibly kind. And then Megan, I went over and hugged her after the press conference, because Phil said, she watches the press conferences back, and she always brings it up to him that I thanked them after the questions. And then Megan said that it was nice to meet my girlfriend Maggie, who was who made her On the Horn debut in the one that we did from my apartment last week after the win at Rhode Island. So Maggie's texting me right now, and Megan, if you're watching this, Maggie is overjoyed at the fact that you said it was nice to meet her in the press conference. So a huge thank you to everyone involved in that exchange, because that warmed my heart on this Monday. Anyway, let's get to the game. I don't want to wax poetic about that for too long, but it meant a great deal to me. So Phil, Megan, thank you so much. Michael Belle has grown so much, and I'm glad that Adam Epstein asked the question in the post-game presser, because I wanted to ask about it. I wrote about it a little bit, them using him at the 5. I think VCU has played some of their best basketball this year when they go to that smaller lineup, and that's not to say, look, Zach Joachim has been great for this team. This wasn't one of his better games. He had 7 points. He was 3 of 7 from the floor, and VCU, for a lot of that second half, went to that lineup with Belle at the 5. And I think I've called it, kind of a small ball lineup in stories, but Belle is so strong. I think, what is he listed at, 6'8", 220 or something like that? And he can match up with bigs down there. Phil brought up the Bonaventure game earlier in the year when Mitchell, the great back to the basket post scorer that the Bonnies have, was really having a good game against VCU, and he said Belle affected him defensively more than anyone. And so he can match up with true 5s down there, and he allows VCU to really spread the floor, because he hit 2 threes today. He was 2 of 4 from 3, and one of them was a huge shot in that second half. I'll try and get to the sequences here and walk through them during that second half. But his ability to stretch the floor proved a real mismatch for St. Joseph's, and I think that it gave Ajagbor issues specifically because it pulled him away from the basket and allowed VCU to function better offensively, because Justice Ajagbor, 6 blocks for St. Joseph's today. He was a phenomenal rim protector. We knew coming into this game that he was one of the best in the A-10, but man, he was a monster down there. And Phil said that VCU got tentative around the rim, especially in that first half. And Ajagbor had 4 of those blocks in the second half, but VCU was better at not letting him inhibit their aggressiveness in trying to attack the rim. They kind of changed their mentality, and if he blocks your shot, he blocks your shot. You got to go up strong with it either way. And VCU was better about that in the second half, despite the fact that Ajagbor got 4 blocks. And I think Belle playing at the 5, them playing a little smaller, stretching the floor, pulled him away from the basket a little bit and allowed VCU more opportunities to get easy finishes around the rim. Brandon Jennings. So this anecdote, I'm about to write my game story for the paper tomorrow, and this anecdote stood out to me in the press conference, because Phil talked about on Saturday, I think he dropped his son off, or he picked his son up maybe from the Siegel Center, and Brandon was in here getting shots up with the gun, is what they call it. It's the shooting machine, the automatic shooter that gets the ball back to you. And Brandon was in here getting shots up, and Phil picked his son up, took him to a basketball game, eventually dropped him back off at a couple hours later, and Brandon was still in here getting shots up. Brandon Jennings, 4 of 4 from 3, hit a couple of huge ones in that second half. And so great to see hard work pay off for a guy that this arena obviously loves. Like, the roars for Brandon in the pregame introduction are always wonderful. He's the St. Christopher's guy. He was the All-Metro Player of the Year for us. it's a joy for a lot of people to see the hometown kid be successful in a VCU uniform. And he's just, like Phil called him, I think his words were a stone cold winner earlier in the year. I want to say that was after the Bonaventure game when it was Brandon getting to the line down the stretch that kind of willed VCU to victory. That's a good way to say it. I'd say clutch gene a little bit. Like Brandon, I think, has just made his best plays and had his best sequences this season late in games when VCU really needed it, and that was the case again today. Tyrell Ward, 9 points, continues to make an impact. Phil said he didn't have it on his bingo card that Tyrell was going to play almost 23 minutes. He ended up with 22-41 today. But that's easily his biggest impact in a game in A-10 play. The energy for him is just different right now, right? Like Phil talked about it. I think Michael Belle talked about it too in that, like, the post-game conversation with Robbie and Rodney and Adam Epstein after the Rhode Island win, that Tyrell's energy in practice over the last few weeks has just been a lot better. Look, he was frustrated about not playing. Phil has said it. Ahmad's gotten frustrated about not playing. Anyone should be frustrated about not playing. Everyone wants to be on the floor, right? But Tyrell, in terms of his mentality and practice and his reaction to that playing time kind of drying up, has just gotten a lot better, it seems, over these last few weeks. And that's got him back on the floor. And he ended up with 9 points. He had a big 3 as well, 4 rebounds. He was just diving on the floor after loose balls. Like, it looked like his energy to me, he's just flipped the switch mentality-wise to a point where he's not worried so much about the shots falling. He's worried about doing the little things to try and affect winning, and that's Phil Martelli has talked about that a lot. When you do that, the shots start falling, and the rest starts to flow. So let's get into the sequences a little bit here, because this was a really back and forth game. Like I said, 11 lead changes, 9 ties. Hawks came to play. They led for large stretches of that first half. And then late in the first half, VCU 8-0 run shortly before the break. They're up 34-29 at the break. Terrence Hill, Brandon Jennings threes were a huge part of that late run in the first half for VCU to take what I believe matched their largest lead, or was their largest lead, into halftime. And then St. Joseph's, came out and threw a haymaker early on in that second half. 11-0 run, capped by Derek Simpson 3. He was phenomenal tonight. Huge tip of the cap to Derek Simpson. 10 of 16 from the floor, game high 27 points, 4 assists. He was phenomenal. He was trying to will St. Joseph's to what would have been a huge road win for them. And he gave VCU trouble all night. He played a great game. So he hits a 3 on the left wing for 43-36. That's an 11-0 run with about 16 minutes to play. And there's a nervous energy in here, right? And then Michael Belle tray on the right wing off a Jadrian Tracy assist. That's a huge shot. That makes it 43-39 with 16 minutes to play, and that got VCU going, right? That run culminated and kept kind of going back and forth. VCU kept chipping away at the deficit, and then a Bell wide open 3 at the top of the key for 51-48 with 13-14 to play. After a Williford tray restored that 6-point cushion, for St. Joseph's, made it 51-45. And then 12:42 to play, Michael Belle slam off a Terrence Hill assist. That was Terrence's 6th dime for the game. That was 16 points, 7 to 9 from the floor for Belle at that point. He roared after that dunk. That was a huge bucket. And then a Michael Belle chase down block from behind. I mean, he did a little bit of everything. 3 steals, 2 blocks today, 5 rebounds, 16 over on the plus minus. I mean, Belle and Hill really stand out on the stat sheet, right? Because Terrence is 19 over on the plus minus. Belle is 16 over, and Tyrell Ward is 9 over. Interestingly, the starting 5 were all in the negatives on the plus minus. So it was VCU's bench that really did it for them in this game. They finished with a 44-11 edge in bench points. We've talked about it ad nauseum throughout the season, but their depth has been one of the greatest strengths of this group, and it certainly was today. Tyrell Ward catch and shoot 3 on the left wing off another Hill assist with 11 minutes to play. That made it 55-53. That was 7 assists for Terrence at that point. And then let's look at where VCU really takes control here, because Tyrell hits a free throw for 60-59. VCU with 6:58 to play. And then a Jagbor, a block on Lazar as he was trying to throw down. That was 2 incredible athletes going up at the rim. And a Jagbor won the battle again. Tip of the cap to him and his rim protection today. I mentioned that in the advance for the game. He's phenomenal. Ended up with the 6 blocks, and that really gave VCU trouble trying to get easy 2s. But then Brandon Jennings tray, catch and shoot on the right wing off a Terrence Hill assist. That, I think, was the biggest crowd pop in the Siegel Center this afternoon. That made it 63-59. VCU lead with about 6 minutes to play. That was the 8th and last assist for Terrence. Capped a 6-0 VCU run. And I don't believe after that St. Joseph's ever tied or led again Another Jennings 3 in the right corner with 3 minutes to play off an Evans assist. That made it 69-63 and was really the dagger in this one. Even though, and then there was a Finkley bucket after that made it 69-65. So St. Joseph's was hanging around. They were battling. They were never really out of striking distance, but VCU kind of kept them at arm's length there down the stretch. But still, Simpson bucket under a minute to play. That made it 73-69. It's a 4-point game. And Jennings and Hill, did Terrence hit both of those free throws? Yeah, some clutch free throws by Terrence and Brandon there with under a minute to play, because Simpson hit a 3 with 28.4 to play to keep St. Joseph's alive. I think that made it, 75-72 with 28.4 seconds left. So it was still nervy in here. Game was still very much in jeopardy. But again, Brandon and Terrence, some clutch free throws, and Terrence a huge steal there with about 26 seconds to play to kind of seal the deal. So my big takeaways from this were the smaller lineups with Belle at the 5. Is when VCU played some of their best basketball. His versatility, I wrote about it last week, continues to really shine for this group. And, I think Phil Martelli called him a Swiss Army knife. He's a chess piece. That term keeps coming up in my mind. He's a coach's dream in terms of what he allows you to do maneuverability and lineup-wise. Terrence's distribution was wonderful, and then Tyrell Ward's mentality and competitiveness and impact off the bench seems like he's flipped the switch a little bit. Barry Evans, 7.6 rebounds, 2 steals, good game for him, 2 assists. Lazar Djokovic, like I said, 7 points, 2 assists, 4 rebounds, and Ahmad Noel had a bucket. Nick Lewis held scoreless. He struggled a little bit lately. It's been such a phenomenal season for Nick, but I think just a lull for him these last few games. It's not his best stretch. Expect him to get back on track. And yeah, VCU, the rebounding battle. St. Joseph's was killing them on the glass in that first half. I'm trying to remember what the rebounding margin was at halftime. I don't have the halftime box here in front of me. Actually, I do. Let's see if I can find it. We're already at 12 minutes for this on the horn, so I need to wrap this up here. But I'm going to try and find, here it is, 24-16 edge in the rebounding battle for St. Joseph's at halftime, right? So that was a huge part of them being able to lead for long stretches of that first half, despite the fact that VCU was up 5 at halftime. And then it ended up 37-35. So VCU cleaned it up on the glass in the second half, and particularly the offensive rebounding, because VCU shot it better in the second half, but they ended up, they only had 3 offensive rebounds in the first half. And they ended up with 11 for the game. So 8 offensive rebounds in the second half, ended up with a 15-7 edge and second chance points. They were able to extend some key possessions, and that was huge for VCU as well. St. Joseph's 18 turnovers, too. I think VCU disrupted really well defensively in this game. And 12-8 points off turnovers. You'd like to be able to turn 18 turnovers into more than 12 points. But VCU 17-12 edge and fast break points. Like I said, 15-7 in second chance points. St. Joseph's 34-32 in the paint. So they didn't kill him inside. And again, the big one that stands out on the stat sheet to me is 44-11 edge and bench points for VCU. It was Hill, Belle, Ward who really played the best minutes for VCU in this game, all coming off the bench. So Rams 79, Hawks 72. This is a big win for VCU. There were a lot of teams in the A10 standings, which I'm going to pull up right now, who were tied at 3-2. And like I said, the Hawks were playing good ball coming into this game. They'd won 3 in a row, and they came to play and gave VCU trouble. They had to fight for this one. So VCU to 13-6, 4-2. They kind of get their noses out in front of that pack of 3-2 and 3-3 teams in there. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what the George Washington, George Mason score is. Let me see if I can pull that up here. Because I know that game was going on and maybe finishing up as we were in the press conference. Ooh, they're tied at 60 with 3:40 to play in that game right now. So that'll have a major bearing on how the middle of the A10 looks, behind your leaders, St. Louis right now, who are ranked. That's huge for the A10 to have St. Louis ranked. They look phenomenal right now. They're 17-1. Mason also 17-1, 5-0 in A10 play. Dayton is 5-0. So VCU, depending on that G-Dub Mason outcome, it's a big win for them to be able to get their noses in front of that pack. And they're in the 4 spot right now, the last double bye spot in the A10. I need to wrap this up. Y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. VCU 79, St. Joseph 72, Rams to 13-6, 4-2 A10. They play at Davidson on Saturday. I'm going to be down there. Screw those pool noodles. Because every time we go to Davidson, I think about the swim team who wears the Speedos in the front of the student section and hits the damn pool noodles on the wall. It's loud as hell. Davidson is 11-6, 3-2 in A10. So that's not an easy road trip at all for VCU. But this is On the Horn. I'm Zach Joachim. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll see you this week, later this week on Saturday at Davidson. Thanks, guys.